The microphone crackled once. Then silence. A crowd of parents in pressed suits and floral dresses held up phones, trying to capture what should have been the proudest moment of my life. Instead, I watched my stepson clear his throat and smirk into the mic. "I want to thank my mom," he said, glancing at Celia, who beamed from the front row like she'd just won something. "And of course, my second dad, Mr. Whitaker. You've been the real role model in my life." There it was. A few people chuckled. Some clapped. I didn't blink. But then came the knife twist. "And hey," Evan added, spinning halfway toward me in the crowd. "Shout out to the guy who paid the bills." Laughter. Louder this time. Real, unfiltered, humiliating. I just sat there. Back row, center seat. Beige jacket. Tie slightly crooked from the sprint I made earlier to not miss the ceremony. No one noticed. No one cared. Certainly not the kid I'd raised like my own for 18 years. 18 years. Every orthodontist appointment. Every Friday night flu. Every 3 a.m. nightmare when he was 5 and thought a shadow on the wall was a monster. It was always me. Not Whitaker, with his designer cufflinks and his smug weekly work dinners with my wife. No, it was the man in the back row, in the same shoes he wore when Evan first called him dad. The crowd kept laughing. His friends clapped him on the back as he handed the mic off and made his way down the stage, pumping his fist like he'd just delivered a killer roast. I smiled. Just once. Not with my mouth, not really. More like a twitch in the corner of my eye. The kind of smile people mistake for understanding or humility. But it wasn't that. It was the smile of a man who'd just remembered everything. If you're still listening and you're one of the 90% who haven't subscribed yet, this is your moment. It helps our small team keep bringing you stories like this one. You won't believe how far this one goes. Back to the humiliation. Celia didn't look at me when she returned to her seat beside me. Her phone was already in her hand, typing, probably texting Whitaker. Wasn't that sweet? Maybe a laughing emoji. She didn't even glance at me. "Great speech," I muttered. She tilted her head toward me, half laughing. "Oh, come on, it was a joke. Don't be so dramatic." Joke. That word hit harder than the speech. The ceremony droned on. Honor cords, scholarships, shaking hands with faculty in goofy robes, but I didn't hear a word of it. My ears were buzzing. Not from rage. That would have been easy. No, this was something colder. Quieter. Like hearing the sound of a lock clicking shut behind you. As we filed out into the parking lot, Evan passed me like I was the valet. His friends swarmed him, and Celia was already arm in arm with her co-workers, pointing at Whitaker like he was family. Nobody asked me to take pictures. Nobody handed me a cap or a stole or said, "Get in the photo." I wasn't invisible. I was worse. I was decorative. We got home around 9. I went straight to the garage. Quiet, careful steps, like walking through a church you used to believe in. In the far corner, under a stack of holiday decorations and in used camping gear, sat the black fireproof box I hadn't opened in over a year. I wiped the dust off the top with my sleeve and clicked the lock. Inside, one document folder, one key, and a cashier's check for $250,000 made out to Harvard University. Signed. Certified. Still valid. I stared at the amount. $250,000. Money I'd been socking away since Evan was in 8th grade. Cutting back on everything. My truck, my vacations, my health, frankly. All for a future I thought I was building for someone who respected the foundation under his feet. I took out the check, sat with it in my hand. Then I put it back in the folder, closed the box, locked it, and placed it on the shelf. Not in the corner this time, but in the center. Some things don't need to be burned to be erased. Some things just need to stay sealed. I looked around the garage, taking in all the pieces of my quiet little life. Tools I bought secondhand, shelves I built myself, even the dent in the wall from Evan's failed skateboard stunt. Then I walked back inside. Nobody noticed I was gone. Celia was pouring a glass of wine, laughing at something Whitaker had posted online. Evan was on the couch, texting someone, probably one of the girls who'd cooed at him after the ceremony. I didn't say a word, but something had changed. Quietly, permanently, because while they were celebrating Evan's future, I had just rewritten it. The champagne bottle popped like a gunshot in the dining room, and everyone cheered. Celia clinked glasses with Evan and Whitaker like they were the Three Musketeers, beaming over a crystal centerpiece I'd paid for, but couldn't name. I stood near the back, holding a half-full glass I hadn't sipped. The bubbles fizzed out before I even raised it. To Evan, Whitaker toasted. And to Harvard. Applause. Laughter. Evan did a mock bow, soaking in the glow like he'd built the road he was walking on. He hadn't. I had. 18 years of late nights and early mornings. Lunches packed. Sickness handled. Rent paid. Insurance filed. Tutoring arranged. None of it flashy. Just stable. Reliable. Unremarkable. And now, apparently, unnecessary. I slipped out during the cake cutting. My stomach felt like it had swallowed glass. I told Celia I needed to get something from the study. She didn't even look up from her phone. She was scrolling through photos of Evan posing with Whitaker, hand on his shoulder like a proud father, like a man who earned the right. The door clicked behind me, muffling the laughter. I sat at my desk, reached for the drawer I hadn't opened in years. Evan's old school photos were still there. His first-grade portrait, gap-toothed and crooked tie. His fifth-grade science fair ribbon. I'd stayed up with him until 2 a.m. hot gluing that volcano. Piano recital programs. A Father's Day card from middle school with a drawing of me as Superman. The same hand that drew that card had just handed me a sentence that would stay lodged in my ribs until the day I died. Thanks to the guy who paid the bills. The desk light flickered once. I flipped the card over and stared at my own name, written in green marker. Dad. Apparently, that title had an expiration date. Behind me, the door creaked. Celia leaned against the frame, wine glass in hand. You disappeared, she said with mock concern. Everything okay? I looked at her. Said nothing. She sighed. Oh, come on. It was just a joke. He didn't mean anything by it. That word again. Joke. The verbal garbage disposal for cruelty. Toss your worst words in there. Slap on a grin, and hit spin. Don't be so sensitive, she added, a touch of amusement in her voice now, like she was offering therapy to a child who'd scraped his knee. I turned the desk drawer shut. You know, she continued, swirling her drink. You always get weird during events. Just try to enjoy the moment, all right? I didn't answer. She left without pressing. After the door shut again, I sat in silence. The kind of silence you don't measure in minutes, but in realizations. Something had ended. Not loudly, not in a scream or a slammed door. Just subtly, like a rope going slack. Eventually, I stood, walked out, down the hall, through the kitchen, past the laughter and the Harvard jokes and the sloshing glasses, to the garage. The box was still where I'd left it. Fireproof. Sealed. Untouched since the day I deposited the final transfer. I opened it. Slowly. Reverently. Inside, one clean, cold envelope. A $250,000 cashier's check. Addressed to Harvard. My signature crisp at the bottom. I'd had it ready for months. Double-checked the tuition schedules. Lined it up with housing and meal plans. Financial aid covered almost nothing. Evan had bombed the FAFSA by listing Celia's income, but skipping mine. He didn't even know how badly he needed me. Or maybe he did, and just assumed I'd come through. Like always. But assumptions have a shelf life. And I had just reached mine. I stared at the check. For a moment, I imagined walking into his room and handing it to him. Letting him hug me with that performative sincerity he used for social media posts. Letting him take it. Letting him win. But then I thought about Whitaker's hand on his shoulder. Celia's smirk when she said, "Don't be so sensitive." The microphone. The laughter. The heat in my face as I sat in the back row, invisible in plain sight. I slid the check back into the envelope. Closed the lid. Relocked the box. And this time, I didn't shove it into a corner. I set it in the center of the workbench. Dead center. Like a reminder. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need to explode. It just needs to simmer. And I had just turned on the stove. Sunlight cut through the trees like knives. One of those unseasonably warm mornings that tricks everyone into believing the world's still gentle. Our backyard was crammed with white folding chairs, pastel tablecloths, flutes of cheap champagne, and conversations I wasn't part of. The brunch was Celia's idea. Just a little celebration with friends from work, she'd said. Friends from her work, obviously. Evan didn't argue. Neither did I. Whitaker was there again, of course. Hair too dark for his age. Teeth too white for someone who smokes as much as he does. He was pouring mimosas like he lived there. Like this was his backyard, his son, his wife. And maybe, in some quietly disgusting way, it was. Evan stood beside him, clinking glasses with Whitaker like they were frat brothers. "You always got me," I heard him say, laughing. "Way more than anyone else ever did." A pause. "You know what I mean." Whitaker laughed like a man who'd already won. Celia pretended not to hear it, but I caught the smirk at the edge of her mouth. One of those thin, satisfied lines that doesn't quite qualify as a smile. Not happy, just smug. I stood by the sliding door holding a small envelope. Inside was a card, a handwritten message I'd spent an hour crafting the night before. Congratulations. And a cashier's check for $1,000. Not the tuition money, just a gesture. A seed. My name signed at the bottom. I stepped forward. "Evan," I said, offering it. He glanced over his shoulder, took the envelope with the kind of grip you use for passing napkins. "Thanks," he muttered. No eye contact, no smile, no curiosity. He didn't open it, just shoved it in his pocket and turned back to Whitaker. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, long enough for it to sting. Then I nodded, at no one in particular, and walked back inside. In the kitchen, I washed a clean dish, dried it, rewashed it. The kind of pointless task you do when the alternative is screaming into your own skull. I went upstairs, shut the door to my office, sat in the desk chair that squeaks if I lean too far left, and opened the tab I hadn't clicked in over a year, the education fund. Balance, $257,412.68. I stared at it like it was a crime scene. Every cent had come from my salary. None from Celia. Whitaker sure as hell hadn't chipped in. I changed the password. First step. Then, I opened a separate account under a different trust. Quiet. Controlled. The beneficiary listed, Grace E. Marshall. She didn't know me. Yet, I began the transfer. Not all of it, just enough to break the illusion. $250,000. Exactly what Harvard had quoted in their letter. Once the funds cleared, I printed the transaction slip, folded it neatly, slid it into the drawer beneath Evan's old science fair ribbon. Not for drama, just for record keeping. Control isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a series of very deliberate, very quiet steps that lead to a place no one expects until the door closes behind them. Downstairs, someone popped another bottle. Laughter exploded. I heard Whitaker's voice, something about raising a glass to the next great mind of Harvard. No one raised a glass to me. No one even looked up when I walked out to my car and drove away. I didn't tell Celia I was going to the hardware store. Didn't say I'd be back in an hour, because I wasn't sure I would be. I sat in the car for a long time, key in the ignition, engine off, just watching our house from the curb, watching the silhouettes of people celebrating a version of the world that didn't need me in it. Maybe it never did, but it needed my money, and that part was over. They just didn't know it yet. The office was colder than I remembered, or maybe I was just finally aware of the temperature now that my blood wasn't boiling every second. I hadn't seen Alan, my estate attorney, in nearly 3 years. Last time we'd spoken, it was to update my living will after Celia and I refinanced the house to help pay for Evan's future. She had insisted. "It's not debt, it's investment," she chirped. Alan stood when I entered, surprised. "Daniel, didn't expect to see you again so soon." "I'm redirecting the legacy," I said. That raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning, I replied calmly. The Harvard Fund is no longer going to Harvard, and definitely not to Evan. Alan blinked once. "You're serious?" I nodded. "Dead." He sat back down. "All right, show me what you've got." I slid the folder across the desk. Inside was a full printout of the education trust I'd built over 18 years. A timeline of every deposit, every reinvested dividend, and a name written at the top of a fresh application, Grace Evelyn Marshall. "Who is she?" he asked. "Daughter of the night janitor at the firm where Celia used to intern. Smart. Quiet. MIT acceptance. No way to pay. Her mom's working 2 jobs. Her dad passed from lung cancer 2 years ago." Alan gave me a look. "How do you even know that?" I shrugged. "I read her application essays. I still get the scholarship board updates Celia filters straight to trash. They mentioned her as a finalist for a regional grant that didn't go through. Not many people would do this," Alan muttered, scanning the papers. "Yeah," I said. "That's kind of the point. We established the scholarship that day, quietly, without press, under a pseudonym. The Evelyn Legacy Award. First-generation college students only. Priority to students in science and engineering." He asked if I wanted to inform Grace directly. "No," I said. "Let the school handle it. I want her to open that email and feel like someone out there saw her. No name. Just help." By the time I walked out of that building, $250,000 had moved. Not as punishment, but as precision. Across town, I imagined Evan sprawled on the couch, PlayStation controller in hand, bragging about how the funds locked and loaded. Probably telling someone Celia's got it all managed, probably repeating whatever lie she fed him about their financial confidence. And she was lying. Again. A few nights prior, I heard her whispering on the phone, doors slightly ajar. No, Daniel hasn't said anything. It's fine, Whit. He's predictable. Harvard's paid through the semester. We're good. Predictable. Maybe once. That night, I opened a drawer I hadn't touched since before the wedding. Inside was the only photo I had left of my sister Evelyn. 17 years old. Graduation cap too big for her head. We were kids. She died at 19. Car accident. No seatbelt. No second chance. She'd wanted to be a robotics engineer, but she never made it to college. I ran my thumb over the edge of the photo, then tucked it under the scholarship documents in my safe. It felt right. Quietly right. Meanwhile, Celia posted a photo of Evan on Facebook, smiling in a Harvard sweatshirt, standing next to Whitaker. The caption read, "So proud of our future scientist. Big brains and bigger hearts run in this family. Blue heart hashtag Harvard-bound hashtag proud mama hashtag blessed." There wasn't a single mention of me. I stared at it for exactly 4 seconds, then closed the app. The next morning, Grace's mother received an email she read 3 times before believing it. A full tuition award. Housing. Meals. Book stipend. Laptop allowance. No strings. Just a sentence at the bottom. This opportunity is made possible by a private donor who believes in your daughter's future. That night, as Celia poured herself another glass of wine and Evan bragged to his friends about joining the Crimson Robotics team in the fall, I sat in my car outside Grace's neighborhood. Not watching. Just remembering what real hope used to look like. The house was old. Faded siding. Rust along the gutter. But the porch light was on. And through the curtain, I saw Grace at the kitchen table, laptop open, reading something with her hand over her mouth. She didn't scream. She didn't dance. She just closed her eyes and smiled. That was all I needed. Celia didn't scream at first. That would come later. Initially, it was a sound closer to an animal catching its paw in a trap. A sharp inhale. A pause. Then the telltale, furious tapping of acrylic nails on a phone screen. I watched from the hallway, out of sight, as she squinted at her laptop and muttered, "That can't be right." It was a Tuesday. Morning light spilled across the kitchen tile. The smell of her burnt espresso still hung in the air. She'd opened her email during breakfast and froze on one line. Final notice, second tuition payment overdue, Harvard University. She stared at it like it was a prank. Refreshed the page. Checked the spam folder. Hit reload again. Then again. System error. She mumbled, like if she repeated it, the server would apologize. Then she called Evan. I heard the speaker click on. "Hey Mom, what's up? Did you get anything from Harvard today?" No. They're saying the second tuition payment is overdue." A pause. Then Evan's voice, more irritated than worried. "Wait, what? I thought Dad already took care of that." "I thought he did too," she snapped, spinning around to grab her phone from the counter. The panic was real now. That desperate, rising realization that maybe, just maybe, the foundation wasn't as solid as she'd assumed. And maybe the man she treated like furniture had just moved the entire floor beneath her. "Call him," Evan said. Maybe he forgot. She rolled her eyes like the idea offended her. "He doesn't forget. Not about money. He's been acting weird, though. Just call him." She did. My phone rang twice before I answered. I was in my office, going over receipts for Grace's laptop fund. "Daniel," Celia said, skipping greetings. "We got an email. From Harvard." I didn't ask what it said. I already knew. She continued, her voice tight. "They're saying the second payment's overdue. You said you handled it." I could hear Evan in the background. "Put him on speaker." She did. Evan spoke first. "Dad, did you forget to send the payment?" I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at the leaf blower across the street. "Calm." "No," I said. Evan hesitated. "Wait, so you did send it?" "No," I repeated. "I didn't forget." "What?" I finally remembered. Silence. 2 confused breathers on the other end of the line. Then I hung up. No drama. No raised voice. Just a statement. I finally remembered. 5 minutes later, Celia's name lit up my screen again. I ignored it. Then Evan. Then again, Celia. Then unknown. Still ignored. Eventually, the buzzing stopped. In the silence, I walked downstairs, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the breakfast table. The same seat I used to occupy every morning when Evan was in high school. Same view of the backyard. Same refrigerator with his childhood drawings still magnet pinned to the door like relics from a life they'd outgrown, but I hadn't. Back upstairs, Celia's voice turned frantic. "He's playing a game," she hissed. "Trying to prove a point. That's what this is." Evan wasn't so sure. "But why now?" "Because he's bitter. He's always been jealous of how close you and Whitaker are. He's being petty." "Should I email the school?" "No," she snapped. "Let me talk to Whit. We'll fix this." I smiled. "Yes, go talk to Whitaker. Let the man who called me Dan the doormat behind my back try to fill in the blanks I'd quietly erased." Later that afternoon, Evan sent me a text. "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. Instead, I took Grace's acceptance packet out of the drawer. read the words I'd already memorized. Watched her name in bold at the top. Grace Evelyn Marshall, class of 2027. No overdue notice. No final warning. Just gratitude. And a path someone else thought was impossible, until someone remembered her. Meanwhile, in a house that once felt like mine, confusion was turning into suspicion. And suspicion, I knew, was just the warm-up act. The real performance was still coming. The restaurant they chose was predictable, trendy, overpriced, quiet enough to whisper insults behind polished smiles. Celia texted the address like it was an invitation to a truce. But I knew better. The moment I saw Whitaker already seated at the corner booth, sipping an old-fashioned like a smug little war general, I knew this wasn't peace. It was positioning. "Daniel," Celia said as I approached, voice sweetened with rehearsed concern. "Thank you for coming." Whitaker didn't stand. He just nodded like he was doing me a favor. "Hey, Dan." I took my seat slowly, letting my coat slide off my shoulders like I had all the time in the world. "I did." "They didn't." Celia launched first. "We wanted to clear the air. There's been a misunderstanding." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what we're calling it now?" "You know Evan didn't mean it," she said, leaning forward. "He was joking. You've been in his life since he was in diapers. You're his dad, Daniel. That doesn't just vanish because he said something stupid into a microphone." Whitaker cut in, ever the closer. "He needs you, man. Whatever's going on, just put it aside for the kid. You raised him. He's yours too." I sipped my water. Let the silence hang. Then, with a slight smile, I said, "That's what I thought, until last Saturday." Celia stiffened. Whitaker blinked. "Excuse me." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a plain manila envelope. Slid it across the table. "Neat. Undramatic. What is this?" Celia asked. "Proof," I said, "of everything I no longer owe you." Whitaker opened it, expecting, what, a check? A plea? Instead, he found the withdrawal slips. Complete reallocation logs. Legal confirmation of the trust's new beneficiary. Alan's notary stamp on the final transfer. "The hell is this?" Whitaker muttered, voice cracking for the first time. "I moved the funds," I said matter of fact. "All of them. A while ago." "You what?" Celia snapped. "I didn't steal. I didn't hide. I used my money, my name, my work, for a future I believe in." "You're ruining his life over a speech?" she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "You and Evan did that part yourselves. I'm just making sure someone else gets the life you all pretended to value." Whitaker tossed the envelope onto the table like it was poisoned. "This isn't legal." "It's airtight," I replied. Alan made sure. Celia's hands trembled. She didn't reach for her wine. Didn't look at Whitaker. She just stared at me like I'd just rewritten a language she thought only she could speak. "I don't believe this," she whispered. "You'd throw him away like that?" I stood. "You mean the way you threw me away at that graduation?" Her lips parted. No sound. Whitaker leaned back like he'd just remembered a meeting he wanted to miss. I straightened my collar. "You taught him well, Celia. How to pretend loyalty while cashing in on someone else's sacrifice. How to wear pride like a costume and discard it the moment it wrinkles. Evan didn't get that from me." Celia's eyes finally met mine. "So that's it?" "No," I said. "That's finally it." Then I walked out. No raised voice. No slammed door. Just footsteps on polished tile, quiet and even. Outside, the air smelled like honeysuckle and car exhaust. I stood by my car for a moment, breathing it in. In the rearview mirror, I saw the maitre d' handing them the check. Funny thing about expensive places, they don't care who raised who. They only care who pays. And I wasn't paying anymore. The call came at 8:41 a.m. on a Thursday. Evan's name on the screen, 3 missed calls already that morning. I let it ring. At 8:44, I picked up. Not because I was curious. I already knew why he was calling. Harvard doesn't wait quietly, and Evan had lived his entire life assuming someone else would keep his safety net taut and invisible. This was the moment he realized it was gone. His voice cracked before the first sentence was even finished. "Dad, they said I'm not enrolled." I said nothing. "They sent me an email." And called. "They said the funds didn't come through for the semester. My housing's been pulled. I have to vacate by Monday." I don't understand." "Yes, you do," I said flatly. "No. I mean, can you just call them? Fix it. They're not broken." There was a pause. A short silence filled with shallow breathing. I could hear the panic rising, bubbling beneath the surface like a pot ready to boil over. "They said if the payment isn't made by tomorrow at noon, my spot's forfeited. All of it. I lose everything. Please." I waited for the word. The one that never came. "No, sorry. No, I was wrong." No acknowledgement of what he did or what he said. Just please. Like I was a vending machine he didn't know he'd kicked. I'm not the one who left you stranded, I said, calm as ice. You did that with a microphone and a smile. Another pause, longer this time. Then the sound of the phone shifting, fumbling, and Celia's voice exploded through the speaker. Sharp, frantic, unglued. What the hell is wrong with you? He's your son. No, I said evenly. He's your project. Daniel, he was a kid. He made a joke. No, you made a joke. You built a life where I was the wallet. The background noise. And when he repeated it in front of hundreds of people and cameras, you smiled. Celia didn't reply at first. Then came the shrill attempt at emotional leverage. You're ruining his life over pride? Over some stupid speech? No, I said. I'm just not funding the sequel. Evan's voice returned, shaky now. Dad, I didn't mean it like that. But you meant it, I said. Didn't you? Silence. I didn't wait for an answer. I ended the call. And this time, I blocked both numbers. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. Outside, the leaves were starting to turn. Late September. Sharp air. I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the wind take the first yellow ones from the maple across the street. A single notification buzzed through on my laptop a few minutes later. An email from Harvard's public newsletter. Donor Spotlight. The Evelyn Legacy Award helps one deserving student pursue robotics at MIT. Grace's photo was attached. She stood next to a circuit board, beaming, mid-sentence, mid-laugh. Her smile didn't look performative. It didn't look forced. It looked earned. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. Somewhere, Evan was frantically refreshing his inbox, calling financial aid, begging a system that wasn't built to fix arrogance. And for the first time in nearly 2 decades, I didn't feel responsible. I felt done. Whitaker's office was a glass-walled shrine to self-importance. Floor-to-ceiling windows, leather chairs no one sat in, plaques from conferences he never attended, and a whiskey decanter that hadn't been full since 2016. He was mid-pour when Celia stormed in, eyes blazing, phone in one hand, printout in the other. You need to fix this, she said, not asked, demanded. Whitaker looked up slowly, as if annoyed by the disruption, not yet understanding it was his own funeral she'd just walked into. Fix what? Harvard revoked Evan's enrollment. Housing, classes, all of it. They're threatening permanent expulsion for non-payment. Whitaker raised his eyebrows like a cartoon villain. And Celia blinked. And you're the reason Daniel did this. You're the one who let that speech happen, who let Evan treat him like what, he cut in. Like a backup? Like an ATM? She faltered. He shrugged. He wasn't my kid. Never claimed he was. That was your husband. You want someone to blame? Try the mirror. Celia's voice dropped an octave. You encouraged it. All of it. You let Evan think you'd be there for him. You acted like. I acted, he interrupted with a bitter chuckle, like a guy enjoying a free ride. But when the check's due, I don't sign it. Daniel did. That was always the deal. You knew that. You smug bastard. Don't project your failed strategy onto me, he said, standing. You treated the man like a placeholder and expected him to die grateful. He just turned out to have a spine. The silence after that line was lethal. But it didn't stay silent for long. By noon, the front desk assistant overheard the argument. By 2 p.m., half the staff had replayed the details. By 3, clients were canceling meetings. Conflict of ethics, one emailed. Uncomfortable environment, said another. The firm's social media page turned off comments by 4:30. By 5, Whitaker had locked his office door and instructed his assistant not to forward any calls from Celia. Meanwhile, Evan was unraveling in real time. He posted a shaky video online. Just him, hoodie drawn tight, face pale. Hey guys, I know a lot of you have been asking about what happened. I'm not dropping out. It's complicated. My stepdad, decided not to fund my tuition. I don't know why. He just cut me off. He didn't expect the response he got. The comments weren't kind. You mean the guy who raised you? So you humiliate your stepdad in public, then cry when the money stops. You mock the man who gave you everything. This is the guy who paid for your teeth, your private school, your everything? Bro. Screenshots of Evan's graduation speech circulated again, side by side with Grace's scholarship announcement. Side by side with my name. The contrast was brutal. Her, a first-gen MIT admit. Him, the golden boy who mistook loyalty for obligation. And online, people started choosing sides. And almost none chose his. Celia tried to clean it up. She posted a photo, old, filtered, her and Evan at a baseball game. Family is forever. This too shall pass. She turned off comments within 5 minutes. Whitaker, in a desperate bid for distance, posted a cryptic quote on LinkedIn the next day. Character is revealed when the spotlight dims. The irony was almost Shakespearean. Evan deleted his video, then re-uploaded a new one, comments disabled. Too late. The internet doesn't forget. Neither do people with receipts. And the ones Evan burned were the same ones now watching him flail in the cold, wondering when he'd realize. He hadn't been abandoned. He'd just finally been left to stand on the ashes he lit himself. It started as a local puff piece. A slow news day filler wedged between weather updates and city council drama. Anonymous donor pays MIT tuition for underserved teen. Grace's face was front and center. Beaming, holding a certificate, her mom standing beside her with tears in her eyes. The reporter noted that Grace had nearly given up on MIT due to cost, that her parents had worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs to support her, and that the donor insisted on no publicity. But secrets have a shelf life, especially the good ones. 3 days later, a follow-up article dropped. The byline was different, the tone sharper. Engineer quietly redirects Harvard fund to janitor's daughter after stepson's public humiliation. That headline hit like a sledgehammer. And below it, there I was, smiling awkwardly at the award ceremony, standing next to Grace and her mother in front of a plastic banner and a folding table with a tray of cold cupcakes. No designer suits, no speeches, just presents and proof. Within 48 hours, it exploded. Reddit, Twitter, Facebook shares with captions like, "This is what a real father looks like. He raised someone else's kid for 18 years and was thanked by being mocked. So he gave the money to someone who respected it." Evan who? TikTok edits emerged. Clips from Evan's graduation speech overlaid with slow pans of the newspaper article, the MIT banner, Grace hugging her mom. They synced his line, "Thanks to the guy who paid the bills," with record scratches and captions like, "He sure did." The contrast was brutal, unrelenting, poetic. Meanwhile, Evan's name trended, for all the wrong reasons. Commenters dug up every public post he'd ever made about Harvard, Whitaker, his real role model. They dissected it like a murder scene, pointed out the entitlement, the passive disdain, the casual cruelty of his speech. Memes bloomed like weeds. Celia tried damage control, claimed the story was taken out of context, called it a smear campaign, even hinted that the money had always been intended for charity, which only made it worse. Whitaker stayed silent, deleted his LinkedIn, suspended his firm's social accounts. Rumors swirled that a major client had quietly walked away. I didn't say a word, never gave an interview, never made a statement. I just went back to my work. Grace sent a thank you email that I responded to with a single line, "Make it count." She wrote back, "I already am." A week later, I received a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address, but I recognized the script. The shaky, looping letters. Evan had never mastered cursive, but he tried when he was nervous. The envelope was thick, too thick. I didn't open it right away. Let it sit on the kitchen counter for 2 days. Washed it out of the corner of my eye every time I made coffee, passed by to check the thermostat, fed the dog. When I finally did open it, I didn't read the whole thing. Just the first line. I didn't know. I didn't mean it like that. And that was enough. I folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and filed it in the cabinet beneath the tax returns and insurance policies. Not out of cruelty, out of completion. Evan's words, like so many things in his life, had come too late, too carefully packaged, too focused on himself. But now they'd sit forever in a drawer labeled "What Could Have Been," between receipts and expired warranties. And I sat in silence. Not victorious, just at peace. Because the world had finally seen the truth. Not the version Celia curated. Not the narrative Evan tried to sell. Just one moment, one gesture, and one girl who looked into a crowd and said, "Thank you," like it meant everything. Because to her, it did. And to me, that was enough. The campus was quiet, the way all good beginnings should be. Students in MIT hoodies moved briskly between buildings, clutching laptops and iced coffees, already immersed in a world they'd worked to earn. Grace's dorm was tucked on the far side of campus, not the newest, not the biggest, but solid. Like her, I didn't call ahead. She didn't know I was coming. I didn't want gratitude, just confirmation. The coat I brought was navy, lined, warm enough to handle Boston's October tantrums. I'd asked her mom for Grace's size without explaining why. The tool set was compact, basic screwdriver, pliers, flashlight, duct tape. My kind of welcome kit. She wasn't in when I knocked. That was fine. Better, even. I left the items with the resident assistant and wrote her a short note. "Things break. You fix them. You're built for this." Signed with a small D. I walked slowly back down the hallway. Half-open doors revealed chaotic, hopeful little universes, laundry baskets overflowing, posters of galaxies and protest slogans, voices too excited to whisper. The scent of ramen and dry erase markers filled the air. God, it felt like potential. The real kind. Earned. Quiet. Heavy with meaning. As I pushed open the building's front door, a student jogging in nearly bumped into me. "Sorry, sir," she said, and then, recognizing me from somewhere she couldn't place, added, "Thanks again." I nodded once. Not out of ego, just acknowledgement. Outside, I paused at the steps, looked out across the lawn where students sat in circles, laptops open, pens flying. And somewhere inside that building, the girl I'd chosen over the boy I raised was starting a life not built on performance, but persistence. Back home, the emails had stopped. Harvard had officially marked Evan's account withdrawn due to non-enrollment. Missed payment deadlines. No reinstatement approved. His .edu address was gone. The digital tether severed. The house went on the market last week. Celia hadn't told me directly, but I saw the sign on a drive through the old neighborhood. A real estate photo carousel full of staged lies, fresh flowers, throw pillows, nothing that hinted at the rot beneath the baseboards. I heard through Alan that Whitaker ghosted her. Cut contact. Quietly shifted firms. His assistant leaked a voicemail, Celia begging him to call her back. "You said you'd help." No answer. The new partners were younger, cleaner. They didn't want a scandal magnet. He was yesterday's man. Evan. He posted once on his now private Instagram. A blurry photo of a coffee mug and notebook. Starting over. Some lessons cost more than tuition. Comments, disabled. I didn't respond. Not out of malice. Out of completion. Because what revenge could match this silence? What punishment better than knowing he couldn't spin, couldn't dodge, couldn't charm his way back into the life he mocked? He had every chance. And he wasted every one. Back on campus, I walked to the edge of the quad before turning back one last time. The windows glowed faintly. One of them was hers. I pictured her reading the note, tucking the coat into her closet. Smiling maybe. Not posting. Not performing. Just living. The wind picked up. Crisp, clean. And I smiled, not because I'd won, but because for the first time in a very long time, I had given something to someone who actually saw me.